What's going on, everybody? It's your boy BJ, the DJ. You are now tuned into the rewrap. This is episode 9. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. The rewrap is available on all major streaming platforms. And if you haven't already tapped in with them boys at Over the Top with Chad and Tony, make sure you do so. You can find me on there as a recurring guest talking about movies and nostalgic wrestling. Let's get to it. Episode 9. And what I want to do for episode 9 is I want to take it back to the fundamentals of hip hop, right? Back in the day, the DJ was the main attraction of the shows, right? And the MC or the rapper would be the one that would kind of act as like a hype man, right? So the hype man was very important in the early days of hip hop. As time progressed, the MC would become the focal point. Not that the DJ wasn't important, but the MC would become the focal point. And the stage presence of an MC was always important, right? And there came a time where MCs would use the hype man to better their stage presence, right? Um, the hype man's role is to support the primary performer with exclamations, interjections, and sometimes just to allow the MC a chance to catch a breath, right? I know in my days of performing, when I had a hype man on stage with me, it was easier for me to take a second, maybe during a certain word or a certain phrase, to catch that breath so you can keep the live performance going. There's nothing worse than stumbling on your words. There's nothing worse than losing your breath on stage. Hell, I think I even swallowed gum one time on stage. I've never went on stage with gum, and the one time I did, I think I swallowed it in the middle of a song, and I had no hype man to kind of help it, so it was obvious, right? And I had to address the situation afterwards. So the hype man's role was very, very important in the early days of hip hop, right? Early on, the MC acted as the hype man for the DJs, and some of the earliest hype men would include MC Cowboy and Kid Creole from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Um, Early days, the hype man would use a call and response, for example, like throw your hands in the air. And MC Cowboy, one of his most famous lines was "Everybody say ho." So that was the role of the hype man, was to engage the crowd in participation. And it's still to this day what few MCs out there still use hype man. That approach is still the same, right? As an MC is walking off stage to maybe do a change of clothes or something along those lines, the hype man usually stays out there and tries to engage in the crowd, like everybody clap your hands, something along those lines. I know that's kind of like more 80ish, and now it's just a little bit different. Several of the artists that I've seen on stage, I think I saw 50 Cent in his early days, like when Get Rich or Die Trying was first released. He had about 40 people on stage with him, all of them wearing bulletproof vests, of course. And maybe 6 or 7 were holding microphones. And it was a little bit overkill, right? And I've also seen Jay-Z on stage with just himself and no hype man, which I thought was a really dope show. Some of your MCs, your better MCs, can actually engage a crowd by themselves, and they don't necessarily need the hype man. And but some of them do, right? And not that they need them, but some of them find a good way to include them into that to enhance their stage presence, right? The hype man's role becomes beneficial to the MC at times. Some of the biggest rappers would begin their career as hype man, right? We talked about Jay-Z. Jay-Z actually began his career as Jazzo's hype man and would also be a hype man for Big Daddy Kane early on, right? Oftentimes your producers begin as hype man. Let's talk about Diddy, for instance. The whole situation that happened at the Source Awards with Suge Knight, where he called out Diddy, was basically because Diddy was the one you saw front and center in all the videos. You saw him dancing, and you saw him getting the crowd entertained in a lot of the videos in the show and the stage presence for a lot of bad boy artists, right? And Lil Jon, he's the ultimate hype man. And also Jermaine Dupri. I remember Jermaine Dupri being that focal point for like the Brat and Crisscross early on. There's a very, very detailed list of famous hype men. You got Danny Boy O'Connor for House of Pain. House of Pain had the smash hit Jump Around. Diddy, of course, was the hype man for Big and other bad boy artists. Flavor Flav is probably one of the most famous. He was hype man for Chuck D. While Chuck D did his politically charged raps for Public Enemy, Flavor Flav was in the background to throw emphasis on certain words and to, the "Yeah boy," probably his famous slogan. And but he was that presence to help Chuck D kind of maneuver through music and do his thing, right? Flavor Flav was the guy to kind of keep the crowd energized. Probably one of the most famous hype men if you think about it. Freaky Ty, the Lost Boys. We got Joe C for Kid Rock, of course. Yayo for 50 and G Unit. One thing I always remember about Yayo is that Yayo would always throw ad libs in the songs. I thought that was always cool. Like he would throw certain words or phrases in the background of the music on certain G Unit releases and songs. So Memphis Bleak, of course, he would go on to be a hype man of sorts for Jay at certain points. There's a couple songs they have. Coming of Age, for instance, there's the catch and response where they're having the conversation and Jay hands him money and then he tosses it into the crowd. We covered that on Reasonable Doubt. But that would actually help Jay. And I know Jigga What, Jigga Who, he helps out with that song as well. So I've seen some of Jay's shows where he'll bring Bleak on to engage the crowd in certain songs, right? So Proof was actually Eminem's hype man for many, many years until he passed. And now Denon Porter has taken on that role for Eminem. Kendrick Lamar was a hype man for J-Rock. And Schoolboy Q would go on to be a hype man for Kendrick Lamar. And then for the B side of this particular episode, I'm going to talk about who I feel like is the most famous hype man or the best hype man. I won't call him the most famous, but he's the best hype man in the business. And that's Spliff Star, who's hype man for Busta Rhymes, right? This day and age, you don't see a lot of hype men being front and center. You see a lot of people walking around stage with a microphone, trying to engage the crowd or just basically talking over the rapper's songs. I don't think the usage of a hype man is being used creatively like it was in the past. I feel like it's important to find out, because you'll watch some of these newer rappers, their shows are dead. Like nobody's engaged. The crowd's just kind of out there vibing. Everybody's cell phones are up. Nobody is paying attention to really what the rapper is saying. And I noticed that at Lil Wayne's concert that we went to at Marathon Music Works here in Nashville. The cool thing about that, I will say, is that the DJ did a really good job of requesting response from the crowd, right? That show was so dope because it was just Wayne, a DJ, and a drummer. The drummer would, of course, keep the rhythm on track, and the DJ would play the instrumental track in the background, and Wayne just basically carried the crowd himself. Wayne did a very good job of engaging the crowd. The DJ didn't do it as much, right? And I don't know if that was his role or what, but I don't see a lot of newer rappers using the hype man the way it was used in the beginning, and I feel like it's a lost art, right? Very few want to play the back seat to these rappers. Everyone feels like their role is to be front and center. So some of the names I mentioned on this particular list weren't necessarily worried about being front and center. Like Proof had a great career. Denon Porter had a great career with D12. Diddy would go on to be one of the greatest CEOs of all time, despite what he's going through currently. Freaky Ty and the Lost Boys had success on their own. House of Pain, had platinum records. Kendrick Lamar is probably one of the greatest of this generation, of course, right? But Spliff Star was one of them that, he would make appearances on a couple songs, but he wasn't necessarily the one that was ever featured front and center. I know on Buster's album, It Ain't Safe No More, he was heavily featured on a couple key tracks on that particular album, but and he was a member of the Flip Mode Squad. We'll cover all that on the B-side. But yeah, I feel like the art of the hype man is something that has kind of died out over the past few years. Early days of hip hop, very essential. I feel like, I don't know when it changed, but I just remember at some point it just got different, and you just had a bunch of people walking around stage with microphones and very few people really engaging in crowd participation. So yeah, hype man, that's why we're calling this one. Yes y'all. That catch and response, kind of cliche, but is what it is. But yeah, that's what I got. I know this one's a little bit shorter than usual, but I kind of wanted to touch on that lost art. I was watching some old concert footage, and I thought how different it is now than what it used to be, and how little the hype man is used in today's stage presence and performances. So that's what I got. This has been the rewrap. I'm BJ the DJ. Catch you on the B side.